Loner rancher bought a girl for 1 coin, then let her flip it to decide where they'd go. The dust never settled in Copper Creek. It hung in the air like a permanent reminder that this god-forsaken town existed on borrowed time, same as everything else in the Arizona territory. Jake Morrison pulled his worn hat down over his eyes as he guided his horse through the main street, past the saloon where piano music struggled against the desert wind, past the general store with its broken sign swaying on rusted chains. He hadn't come to town for supplies or company. Jake Morrison was a man who kept to himself on his ranch 20 miles north, where the silence was honest and the only conversation came from his cattle and the occasional coyote. But today a telegram had reached him through old Pete at the telegraph office, something about a debt his late brother had left behind. The saloon's bat-wing doors creaked as Jake stepped inside, his spurs jingling against the warped wooden floor. The place reeked of whiskey, tobacco, and desperation. A few weathered faces looked up from their cards, recognized him as the hermit rancher, and returned to their games without interest. "You Morrison?" The voice came from behind the bar, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a face that suggested he'd been on the wrong end of too many fights. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Briggs. Your brother owed me money." Jake's jaw tightened. His brother Danny had been dead 3 months now, killed in a mining accident up in Tombstone. Danny's debts died with him. Briggs laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "Not this one. See, he put up Collateral." He gestured toward a corner table where a young woman sat alone, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the table's scratched surface. She couldn't have been more than 20, with auburn hair that caught the lamplight and a dress that had seen better days. But it was her posture that struck Jake, the way she held herself with dignity despite her circumstances, like a wild flower growing through a crack in stone. "Your brother," Briggs continued, "he was sweet on this one. Marlo, her name is. When he couldn't pay his gambling debts, he offered her indenture instead, legal and binding." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "What kind of indenture?" "The kind that means she works off his debt however I see fit. Been here 2 months now, serving drinks, cleaning up after the drunks, but I'm a reasonable man." Briggs grinned, showing teeth like broken fence posts. "You pay what your brother owed, $50, and she's free to go." $50? It might as well have been 500. Jake's ranch barely kept him fed, and what little money he had went toward keeping his small herd alive through the harsh desert seasons. He looked at the girl again. Marlo. She hadn't raised her eyes once during the conversation, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her knuckles were white from gripping her hands together. "I don't have $50, Jake said quietly. "Then she stays put." Briggs turned away, dismissing him. Jake stood there for a long moment, listening to the piano and the murmur of conversation around him. He thought about walking out, riding back to his ranch, and pretending this conversation had never happened. It would be the smart thing to do, the sensible thing. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his last silver dollar. $1, he said, placing the coin on the bar with a sharp clink. Briggs turned back, eyebrows raised. "You making a joke, cowboy? $1 and a proposition." Jake's voice was steady, though his heart was hammering. "I challenge you to a game of chance. Simple coin flip. I win, the girl goes free. You win, you keep my dollar, and she stays." The saloon had gone quiet. Even the piano player had stopped, sensing drama in the air. Briggs studied Jake's face, looking for signs of a trick. "What's to stop me from just keeping your dollar and telling you to get lost?" "Your reputation." Jake met his eyes steadily. "Word gets around about a man who doesn't honor a wager in front of witnesses. Bad for business." The big man considered this. Around them, other patrons had stopped their games to watch. In a place like Copper Creek, entertainment was scarce, and a good story could travel faster than a telegraph. "One flip," Briggs said finally. "Your dollar against her debt." "Fair enough." Jake picked up the silver coin, feeling its weight in his palm. It was his last dollar, the only thing standing between him and complete destitution. But when he glanced at Marlo again, he saw something that made his decision feel right. A flicker of hope in her eyes, quickly suppressed. "Before we flip," Jake said, his voice carrying across the silent saloon, "I want to make something clear. If I win, the lady gets to choose where she goes. Not me, not you. Her choice." Marlo's head finally lifted, and Jake found himself looking into the most startling blue eyes he'd ever seen. They were the color of desert sky just before dawn, holding depths that spoke of intelligence and strength that hadn't been broken despite her circumstances. "You're saying if you win," Briggs said slowly, "you don't even get to keep her." She's not property to be kept. She's a person who deserves to make her own choices. A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't how these stories usually went. Briggs shrugged. Your funeral, cowboy. Make the flip. Jake balanced the coin on his thumbnail, feeling the weight of every eye in the saloon. But before he could flip it, a soft voice stopped him. Wait. Marlo had risen from her chair and was walking toward them. Up close, Jake could see the exhaustion in her face, but also a strength that reminded him of the desert survivors, the plants and animals that found ways to thrive where others would perish. If this is about my freedom, she said, her voice clear and steady, shouldn't I be the one to flip the coin? Jake looked at her for a long moment, then at Briggs, then back at her. Slowly he extended his hand, offering her the silver dollar. Your choice, he said simply. Her fingers brushed his as she took the coin, and Jake felt something electric pass between them, not romance exactly, but recognition, the acknowledgement of one survivor by another. Marlo held the coin up to the lamplight, examining both sides. Heads I go free, she announced to the room. Tails I stay. She took a deep breath, then sent the coin spinning high into the air. It caught the light as it tumbled, flashing silver against the saloon's dim interior. Every person in the room held their breath as gravity pulled it back down. The coin hit the bar with a musical ping and bounced once before settling. Heads, the saloon erupted in cheers and groans as money changed hands on side bets Jake hadn't even noticed being placed. Briggs stared at the coin for a moment, then nodded curtly. Deal's a deal, he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't happy about it. She's free to go. Marlo picked up the coin and turned to Jake. This belongs to you. Keep it, Jake said. Consider it traveling money. She studied his face with those remarkable blue eyes. You don't even know me. Why would you risk everything for a stranger? Jake considered the question. Why had he done it? Maybe it was because he recognized something in her situation, the feeling of being trapped, of having choices made for you by circumstances beyond your control. Maybe it was because he'd seen too much suffering in the world and wanted to prevent a little more, because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path, he said finally. Marlo was quiet for a moment, then did something unexpected. She flipped the coin again, catching it and slapping it down on the back of her other hand without looking. Heads, I come with you to your ranch, she said. Tails, I head east to Denver, where I hear they need school teachers. Jake's eyebrows shot up. Ma'am, you don't need to. Look at it, she interrupted. Jake looked down at her covered hand, then back at her face. Are you sure about this? I've been making decisions based on other people's choices for too long. Time I made one of my own. She lifted her hand. Heads. Well, Jake said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth for the first time in months. I guess we'd better get going. It's a long ride to the ranch. As they walked toward the saloon's entrance, Marlo asked, What's it like? Your ranch? Quiet, Jake said. Honest work. The land doesn't lie to you. If you treat it right, it treats you right back. But it's not easy living. Easy living is overrated, Marlo replied, and Jake heard something in her voice that suggested she knew exactly what she was talking about. They stepped out into the desert sun, and Jake helped her up onto his horse behind him. As they rode out of Copper Creek, leaving dust clouds in their wake, neither of them spoke for several miles. Finally, Marlo broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Shoot. When you saw me in that saloon, did you know you were going to help me? Jake considered this as his horse picked its way across the rocky terrain. No, he said honestly. I went in there expecting to tell Briggs that my brother's debts weren't my problem, but when I saw you sitting there, he paused. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make sense until after you've done it. And now, do you regret it? Jake thought about his empty pockets, his uncertain future, the fact that he now had another mouth to feed on a ranch that barely supported one person. Then he thought about the alternative, leaving her in that saloon to work off a debt that wasn't rightfully hers. No, he said, I don't regret it. They rode in comfortable silence after that, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Jake found himself thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. This morning he'd been a solitary rancher with simple problems, cattle, weather, and making ends meet. Now he was responsible for someone else, someone who'd shown remarkable courage in the face of circumstances that would have broken weaker people. Tell me about your brother, Marlo said as they crested a ridge that offered a view of the valley below. Jake's hands tightened on the reins. Danny was complicated. He had big dreams and no patience for the work it takes to achieve them. Always looking for the quick score, the easy money. I tried to talk sense into him, but he was family. Yeah, he was family. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry his choices put me in that position. Jake turned in the saddle to look at her. His choices put you there. My choice got you out. Your choice brought you with me. We all own our own decisions from here on out. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, they finally reached Jake's ranch. It wasn't much to look at. A modest house built from local stone, a barn that had seen better days, and corrals that held a small herd of cattle that looked as weathered as everything else. "Home sweet home," Jake said, dismounting and helping Marlo down. She looked around, taking in the humble surroundings. "It's honest," she said finally. "I can respect that." Jake showed her to the small guest room, really just a storage space he'd cleared out years ago but never used. "It's not fancy, but it's private, and the roof doesn't leak. It's perfect," Marlo said, and meant it. That evening, they sat on the porch as the desert cooled, and the first stars appeared. Jake had prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, apologizing for its simplicity. "I've eaten worse," Marlo assured him. "Much worse. Can I ask how you ended up in Copper Creek?" Marlo was quiet for so long that Jake thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I was a school teacher in San Antonio, had a good position, respected in the community, but I made the mistake of refusing the advances of a wealthy man who sat on the school board. He had me dismissed on false charges and made sure no other school in Texas would hire me." Jake felt a familiar anger rising in his chest. "So you came west?" "I came west with what little money I had, hoping to start over. Met your brother on the stagecoach. He was charming, told me about opportunities in Arizona. Offered to help me get established." She laughed bitterly. "I was naive enough to trust him. What happened? He convinced me to loan him money for what he claimed was a sure-thing investment. When that fell through, he asked for more, promising to pay it all back. Before I knew it, I'd given him everything I had." Her voice grew harder. "When I demanded my money back, he told me he'd gambled it away, said he could work something out with his creditor. The indenture. He made it sound temporary, just until he could raise the money. Then he died in that mine accident, and I was stuck." Jake was quiet for a moment, ashamed of his brother's actions but not sure how to express it. Danny always thought he was smarter than everyone else, always thought the next scheme would be the one that paid off. "I don't blame you for his choices," Marlo said gently, "but I want you to know, I'm not looking for charity. I'll earn my keep here. I can cook, clean, help with the ranch work. I'm stronger than I look." "I don't doubt that," Jake said, "but you don't owe me anything. You're free to leave whenever you want. And go where? I have no money, no prospects, no letters of recommendation that aren't tainted by scandal." She gestured toward the desert night. "At least here I have a chance to rebuild." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant call of coyotes and the gentle lowing of cattle. Finally Jake spoke. "There's something I need to tell you. The ranch, it's not doing well. I'm barely keeping my head above water. Drought killed half my herd last year, and what's left isn't enough to make a real profit. I can't promise you much." Marlo looked at him steadily. "Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. You should know what you're getting into. I appreciate that, but I think you should know something too." She smiled, and it transformed her face completely. "I may have been naive about your brother, but I'm not helpless. I have ideas that might help this place." "What kind of ideas?" "Tomorrow, I'll show you. For now I think we both need some rest." As they said goodnight and went to their respective rooms, Jake found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a gambler betting his last dollar, but the steady hope of someone who'd found an unexpected partner in life's struggles. The next morning, Jake woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. He dressed quickly and found Marlo in the kitchen, already preparing breakfast with ingredients he'd forgotten he had. "You're up early," he said. "Old habits. Teachers start their days before dawn." She handed him a cup of coffee that was stronger and better than anything he'd made for himself in months. "I've been thinking about your water situation. What about it? You've got a well, but it's shallow. Have you considered digging deeper, or maybe putting in a windmill?" Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Those things cost money I don't have. What if I told you I knew how to make money without risking what little you have left?" He studied her face, looking for signs of the same reckless optimism that had destroyed his brother. Instead, he saw careful calculation and genuine confidence. "I'm listening." "Education," she said simply. "There are families scattered all through this territory whose children have never seen the inside of a school. Parents who'd pay good money for someone to teach their kids to read and write. You're talking about riding circuit, teaching at different ranches." "Exactly. A traveling teacher could make decent money and provide a real service. And with a base of operations like this ranch, I could establish regular routes, maybe even convince some families to send their children here for longer instruction." Jake felt his excitement building despite himself. That could actually work. "It will work, but I'll need a partner, someone who knows the territory, knows the families, can vouch for my credentials, and in return, we split the profits, use them to improve the ranch, dig that well, buy more cattle, build something sustainable." Jake set down his coffee cup and looked at this remarkable woman who'd literally fallen into his life. Yesterday she'd been a stranger in a desperate situation. Now she was offering him a path forward he'd never even considered. "There's one thing," he said slowly. "What's that?"
We'd be partners in business, but I want to be clear, that doesn't mean anything else. You're free to live your own life, make your own choices about everything else. Marlo smiled that transformative smile again. I appreciate that. But Jake, yeah, let's see where the trail leads before we worry about where it ends. That afternoon, they rode out together to visit their nearest neighbor, the Henderson family, whose 3 children had never been to school. Mrs. Henderson's face lit up when Marlo explained her proposal. Lord knows we've prayed for something like this, she said. When can you start? As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Jake found himself whistling for the first time in months. The future, which had seemed so bleak just 2 days ago, now stretched ahead full of possibilities. I have a confession, Marlo said as they unsaddled their horses. What's that? I weighted that coin. Jake stopped, his hand frozen on the saddle. What? The one I flipped in the saloon. I saw how to do it in a magic show once. A little sleight of hand, and you can make it come up heads every time. Jake stared at her. But you flipped it twice. Once for your freedom, once for coming with me. I know. Her eyes twinkled with mischief. Good thing we both wanted the same thing. Jake began to laugh, a deep sound that came from somewhere he'd forgotten existed. You took control of your own destiny. We both did. That's what partners do. They help each other find their way. As the desert sun set on their second day together, Jake Morrison realized that sometimes the best decisions are the ones that don't make sense until after you've made them. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single coin flip. And sometimes, freedom isn't something you're given, it's something you take, one choice at a time. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but full of promise, like the desert morning that always follows the longest night.